Hi, my name's Steve. I like to talk about colour, things that interest me or things I don't understand fully, or sometimes things I think might interest you. And recently I've been really interested in dark yellow. So I posted something on LinkedIn with the title, Does Dark Yellow Exist? Which was a mistake because I think people interpreted the question in a different way than I intended. And that was my fault, of course. Lots of people answered it by saying that dark yellow changes name to something like brown when it becomes dark. And this is a sort of colour naming thing. Interesting in its own right, but not what I had in mind. And my last video was called Does Brown Exist? And it was a recording of a chat on radio that I was involved in. A caller had asked whether brown really existed as a colour since, well, wasn't it really just dark orange? Now, at the heart of that question was the mistaken idea that hue and colour are the same thing. And what they were really asking was whether brown is its own hue, since it is really dark orange. So lots of questions about colour have these sorts of misunderstandings at their heart. So when I posted on LinkedIn about whether dark yellow exists, quite a lot of people gave answers around the fact that sometimes a dark colour has a different, separate name. Dark red, dark orange, and dark yellow can all become brown, by the way, depending upon which yellow and which red. And one person, quite wittily, I thought, responded with, asking whether dark yellow exists is like asking whether dark white exists. Their point being, of course, that dark white is black. So, sort of my post received a lot of interest, but the responses were all a bit screwed up and confusing. My fault, of course, because the title of my post was confusing. So what I was interested in was this, you can see on the screen now. So for most of the hues here, as they darken, they change colour, of course, but they tend to stay the same hue. Actually, this in itself is an interesting exercise in the difference between hue and colour. But look at the yellow. As it becomes darker, doesn't it become a different hue? Doesn't it become greener? Why is this? Well, one person said that the problem was the white background, and if I changed the background to black, the yellows would look different. Well, certainly things look different on different backgrounds, of course, because of contrast. But if we look at the same circles as before on a black background, the hue shift towards greens still seems to be happening to me. Some people said that this effect has something to do with RGB displays, red, green, blue, and our visual systems only seeing red, green, and blue, with yellow being a combination of red and green. Most of these replies were nonsense, of course. Besides, I have it on good authority, in fact, the highest authority, but I won't reveal my source, that the same thing, this shift in hue with dark yellow, happens with paints and inks. It's nothing to do with RGB or displays. And this problem has, I think, been observed before and is quite well known in design. So this page, written by Lodestar Design, refers to the dark yellow problem in design. They are arguing that you can't get a dark yellow at all, and that when you set the relative luminance of these hues to be the same, the yellow really looks different. Well, I think this is a related but slightly different problem. At first, I thought this was related to the hue shift, but I think what they're talking about stems from the fact that some hues can only be obtained at high chroma, either at high lightness, light yellows, or at low lightness, such as blues. You can only get a chromatic yellow if it has high lightness, or high value if you like. And you can only get a really chromatic blue if it's quite dark. So if you fix the lightness or value, the maximum chroma that you can achieve will vary from hue to hue. And I think this is what we're seeing in Lodestar Design's post. But on the other hand, in this webpage by Ilya Berman, which is called The Dark Secret of Yellow, I think they're touching on the hue shift problem. Again, they point out that dark yellow doesn't look good, but they explicitly say that as you make it darker, you need to progressively make it redder. And they implement this in a gradient tool in something like Photoshop. I think they're finding it necessary to make it redder in order to neutralize the natural movement towards green as it darkens. So why is this happening? David Briggs, who runs the brilliant website Hue Value Chroma, gave a very interesting response on LinkedIn that I'm still thinking about. But one of the things he was saying was that we have to separate out why it's happening in this case, in my example, and whether it always has to happen. And a few other people gave somewhat similar answers, questioning essentially the process by which I'd made the yellow darker. Perhaps I inadvertently changed the hue during that process. Perhaps I did. To be honest, I can't rule out that that's what I'm showing, that it's some sort of artifact of how I darkened these circles. But then I'm not the only person who has seen this or commented on it by far. So I certainly think there's something weird about dark yellow. By the way, I should have called my post not "Does dark yellow exist?", which gets into the whole naming issue. I should have called it "Why does dark yellow change hue?". I've always made mistakes in life because I rush. I'm just impatient. Once I want to do something, once I've had the idea of doing something, I can't rest until it's done. It can't wait until next week or sometimes even tomorrow. I just have to get it out and done. And I remember my A-level chemistry teacher who wrote on my report in 1980 that I was very good at chemistry but made mistakes because of being impetuous. She was right, of course. And as Genesis wrote in their 1977 track, The 11th Earl of Mar, some things never change. See you next time.